Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Monday, February 20th, 2023. First, before I go over the news, I just wanted to say I'm recording this on Sunday night, and I went to the Rage Against the War Machine rally in Washington, D.C. today, and it was really great. It's awesome that the Libertarian Party and the People's Party worked together to put this thing together, and there's a few thousand people there. It was a pretty good turnout, and the speakers were great. I mean, it was a pretty stacked lineup, and it was really cool. I was at the Lincoln Memorial and just seeing everybody there and speaking there, and I met a lot of people that listen to the show and read antiwar.com. So it was, you know, gave me a lot of motivation to keep doing what I'm doing, and it was pretty great. I was there with my son, so it was a little hectic. I had to pretty much keep an eye on him the whole time because he just started walking. So most of my attention was on that. I wanted to kind of write a report on it, but I just didn't really have the time. But I'm gonna probably write something up about it tomorrow at some point. I took a few pictures and everything, but we're gonna have a lot of stuff to post on the blog, I'm sure, from other people. But again, it was a really great event, and it was cool. I mean, it closed out with the three, Dennis Kucinich, Tulsi Gabbard, and Ron Paul speaking at the Lincoln Memorial, and then they marched to the White House, and a few other people spoke there. Unfortunately, I had to leave before that, but I mean, it was great. It was a long event, which I think was good, and just a lot of people involved, all across the political spectrum, which I'm used to because that's what we do at antiwar.com. And I've been to a lot of anti-war rallies, but it was just cool to see people interacting and all that. So it was good. It was encouraging, and I hope we could keep this momentum going and have more events like that. But again, it was a pretty huge undertaking, very well put together by all the organizers and the volunteers and all the speakers. I mean, it was really great. But yeah, keep an eye on the blog and stuff. We'll probably post some stuff there about it. But all right, now to get down to business here. The first story at the top of antiwar.com today: Finland says it will join NATO without Sweden. So Finnish officials have said that they will join NATO if Turkey approves their membership without Sweden. And this is reversing their previous position that they would only join together with Sweden. For a while, that's what Finnish officials were saying, is that their memberships are linked and that they wouldn't do it without their friends over in Sweden. And these comments came after Erdogan, the Turkish president, said that they might only approve Finland because they're not happy with Sweden. There was a protest in front of the Turkish embassy there where a Quran was burned. But besides that, in general, they've been asking a lot more of Sweden when it comes to extraditions, and they accuse them of supporting the Kurdish militant groups a lot more than they do of Finland. So they've had just more issues with Sweden. So the Finnish defense minister, he told the Associated Press on Saturday, and this was at the Munich Security Conference. He said that they would prefer to join NATO with Sweden, but they would not delay their membership if Turkey only approved Finland. Basically saying, if Turkey does that, they just approve Finland, then they'll join. And Finland's president made similar comments on Friday, saying, quote, if Turkey approves Finland's NATO application before Sweden's, Finland cannot do anything about it, end quote. So it seems like, they're ready to go. But where things are at right now, Hungary still needs to approve them. I believe their parliament's expected to vote on it soon, and I think they're going to approve it, but I'm not sure. Who knows? Something could happen there. But when it comes to Turkey, even if they're ready to approve Finland, I mean, obviously they just had that huge earthquake, so they're dealing with that. But also Erdogan and some of his top officials have said they're not going to even bring this to parliament before the election, which is supposed to be held in either May or June. And there's a chance it's going to get delayed now after the earthquake. So even if Finland's ready to go, it still could take a few months. And, the problem is if only Finland joins, Finland is kind of the big issue because it's going to really raise tensions with Russia because they have a huge border with Russia, over 800 miles. And the Russian military is already planning to build up in Western Russia if Finland joins. So again, just more. It's expanding NATO's border with Russia, expanding NATO territory right on Russia's border. But all right, the next one here. This is from Kyle Anzalone. The U.S., France, and the U.K. are divided on support for Ukraine. So at this Munich security conference, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was very gung ho, saying that the UK is going to be the first to send these long range missiles that Ukraine is looking for. But meanwhile, statements from top American and French officials indicate that support for Ukraine in Washington and Paris may be weakening. Or maybe they're just realizing that, it's not really sustainable to keep supporting Ukraine for as long as they want. But at this conference, Sunak said that Ukraine must win the war, and he called on other Western countries to double down on their support for Kiev. Then Kyle points out here that there was a report in the Washington Post, which I went over last week, saying that the Biden administration expressed to Ukraine that this support isn't going to last forever. That all the amount of aid that they've been getting isn't going to last forever was really the message. They think that the Republicans might not be able to keep approving these huge aid packages, although for the most part, Republican leadership is still all ready to go. They want to send Ukraine these longer range weapons and everything, but I think just realistically, these huge aid bills that they've been passing, I guess maybe they don't think they're going to be able to keep getting that much. And also, last month, CIA Director William Burns, he told Zelensky in a secret meeting that at some point assistance is going to be harder to come by. And kind of their message to Ukraine was, these next few months is when you're going to have to regain territory. But then on the other hand, you have this Russia really built up its forces, and they're going on the offense and they're gaining territory. So who knows what Ukraine can really do in these next few months. But Sunak, he still says that London will press ahead, and he announced, quote, the United Kingdom will be the first country to provide Ukraine with longer range weapons. And it's why we're working with our allies to give Ukraine the most advanced air defense systems and build the air force that they need to defend their nation, end quote. And he said, he pointed out that the UK was the first country to promise tanks. They said they were going to send their Challenger 2 tank. They're only sending 14. They only have like 200 tanks, the UK. They don't have that much of a military, so they can't afford to send that many. But it was after the British announced it that the US and Germany said that they were going to send tanks. And also, so there were some French comments. Macron spoke at this, this was in an interview that was published on Saturday with Macron. And he repeated, this is something that he said again. He says that they shouldn't be aiming for a total defeat of Russia. He said, quote, I do not think, as some people do, that we must aim for a total defeat of Russia, attacking Russia on its own soil. Those observers want to, above all else, crush Russia. That has never been the position of France, and it will never be our position, end quote. So, he's referring there to like the British and the Polish who have been more hawkish on this. This has kind of been the theme of throughout this proxy wars, that the French and Germans have had a lot cooler rhetoric, but at the same time, Germany has really been a major supplier of weapons and money to Ukraine. All right. So the next one here, Blinken met with China's foreign minister. This article is from Connor Freeman. So amid simmering tensions between Washington and Beijing, Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi at the Munich Security Conference on Saturday. After the White House ordered the military to shoot down a Chinese balloon which floated over the continental United States, there was a major breakdown in diplomacy. Previously, U.S. officials suggested Blinken would take advantage of the opportunity to help de-escalate the situation. Now, I went over that the other day, that they were going to meet, they're expected to meet, and U.S. officials said that Blinken might use the meeting to, kind of ease tensions after the balloon situation. But no, instead, he confronted Wang over the balloon incident and warned China against providing weapons to Russia for use in its war with Ukraine. This is another claim. Now the U.S. is claiming China might be thinking about sending weapons to Russia, although I don't think, I haven't seen any indication coming from China that that's something that they would want to do. But this is a quote from Blinken. He was on NBC's Meet the Press about his meeting with Wang. He said, quote, "This was an opportunity to speak very clearly and very directly about the fact that China sent a surveillance balloon over our territory, violating our sovereignty, violating international law. And I told him quite simply that that was unacceptable and can never happen again. Without, I can tell you there was no apology," end quote. So he said China didn't apologize. And, he says a lot there, and he's saying that they sent a surveillance balloon over U.S. territory. The Pentagon still hasn't shown any evidence to show that it was a spy balloon, and China still maintains it was a weather balloon. And also, China says it blew over the U.S. by accident, and that appears to have been to be true because based on the weather patterns reporting from the Washington Post and even what U.S. officials are telling the media now, it looks like it blew over the U.S. due to unexpected weather, and the U.S. military was tracking it when it was first launched, according to the Washington Post. So again, just this whole idea that they sent this balloon over the U.S., it's just nonsense, and it shows what a bad diplomat Blinken is. And again, so now the accusation is that China. He's saying that China is considering sending weapons to Russia, citing U.S. intelligence, I guess. Again, there's no proof here, and we've seen claims like this earlier in the war. But, he just went into this meeting, making these claims and just keeping tensions high between the U.S. and China. It seems like that might be his goal. All right, the next one here. Top Republicans press Biden to increase military aid to Taiwan. This is from Kyle Anzalone. 4 high-ranking Republicans in Congress sent a letter to President Joe Biden demanding more military aid for Taiwan. In their letter, the legislators claimed the White House is not doing enough to respond to the growing threat from Beijing. The 4 congressmen who signed on to the letter hold powerful committee appointments. It was Rep. Mike Rogers, Republican from Alabama. He's the chair of the House Armed Services Committee, and then Michael McCall from Texas, chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, along with Senators Roger Wicker, who is the ranking member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, and Jim Reich, who is the ranking member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So the top Republicans in those committees in the House and Senate. And the letter lambasts the White House for failing to act against Chinese threats. It says, quote, "Your national security strategy has identified China as the top geopolitical challenge facing the United States. However, your administration has consistently failed to act with the seriousness and urgency needed to arm and equip Taiwan," end quote. So they're just saying in the letter, apparently, they said the Biden administration did not respond aggressively enough to the Chinese balloon. And anyway, so what they're asking for is they want more military aid for Taiwan. So the National Defense Authorization Act for 2023 that Biden signed into law, it included $2 billion in military aid for Taiwan, which is unprecedented. The U.S. never funded Taiwan's arms purchases. They've always sold them weapons since the diplomatic shift in 1979 when they cut relations with Taipei and opened up with Beijing, but they never financed the purchases. But they want more. They want Biden to add $2 billion in military aid to Taipei in the form of a grant. So a grant means they would just give it to them and they wouldn't get paid back. And this is supposed to be for the fiscal year budget that Biden is expected to request soon for the fiscal year 2024. So I want them to throw in another $2 billion for Taiwan. So they're hawking it up over Taiwan and China, trying to, which is going to eventually, and Kyle mentioned in the article, they acknowledge that this support is going to probably provoke China to increase the military pressure on Taiwan, which is not really any question that it's going to do that. It will do that. They're clearly, every time this stuff happens, when Biden signed the NDAA, they launched major military drills around Taiwan. All right, the next one here. Israel bombs Syria, and they hit an apartment building, and there's 15 people, civilians, reported killed. So Israel hasn't launched an airstrike in Syria in a few weeks, but that changed on early Sunday. Missiles hit Damascus, including a residential complex, badly damaging it and the surrounding area. At least 15 civilians were reported killed, including 2 women, and a large number of injuries are reported, but no specific number. This article is from Jason Ditz, by the way. These guys filled in for me while I was at the rally. Israel has yet to comment directly, which is not uncommon when they attack Syria. Netanyahu accused Iran of recently attacking a Liberian flagged but Israeli linked oil tanker. It's another thing that happened over the weekend. Israel accused Iran of an explosion that took place on an oil tanker. But anyway, when it comes to this airstrike in Syria, I mean, this comes as they're trying to still respond to this earthquake, and that was in northwest Syria. It didn't affect Damascus, but just the fact that they're launching these airstrikes and hitting a residential building and killing this many civilians. I mean, this is a pretty huge strike. And again, Israel regularly bombs Syria. They haven't done it in a few weeks, but then here they come out with this pretty major airstrike while they're trying to deal with the earthquake. And we're not going to see a peep out of Washington, D.C. about this, condemning this or anything, probably. I mean, it is amazing how this stuff just gets swept under the rug and barely reported on. All right. The next one here, there's a big attack in Syria. A lot of things happened in Syria over the weekend. There's an ISIS attack near the city of Homs, killing at least 68 people, overwhelmingly civilians. So this happens as ISIS doesn't control any significant territory inside Syria, but they still have pockets, out in the remote areas of Syria. And these attacks do happen from time to time, but this is a pretty huge one. It said that truffle hunters were targeted by jihadists on motorcycles. And again, just a big, pretty horrible attack. And we've seen U.S. operations against ISIS increase because just the way, I think a lot has to do with the fact that the U.S. is still in Syria, occupying the eastern country, and kind of in the way of the Syrian government going into certain areas. They're a pretty effective fighting force against ISIS. And the Kurds have said if the U.S. leaves, that they'll work with the Syrian government to fight against ISIS. And, they always say that it's not like we would be abandoning them if the U.S. left. They say, okay, if you leave, we're going to be friends with, have a rapprochement with Damascus, but that's something the U.S. doesn't want. They don't want countries normalizing with Syria. They want to keep the country under the crippling sanctions, even as they're responding to this earthquake. But I think if, the U.S. got out of the way, it would probably be better when it comes to ISIS. If you could have, if there's not these restricted areas and these borders within Syria that certain people can't cross, I think probably the kind of still the destabilization of the country that the U.S. is pushing for definitely, I think, gives ISIS the ability to still have somewhat of a foothold. The next one here, a U.S. raid against ISIS. They say that they carried out a raid on Thursday near the Syrian city of Deir ez-Zor. This is the Pentagon claiming this, and they said they killed another ISIS leader. They're always saying that they're killing these ISIS leaders, but we never really know the details. So this person that they killed, Hamza al-Hamsi, who I don't know anything about, he detonated a suicide vest during the raid. Again, this is the Pentagon's account, and it said that the blast resulted in the injury of 4 U.S. soldiers and a dog. So ISIS has shown an ability to replace slain leaders with little loss of effectiveness. CENTCOM did not reveal what motivated this raid, though it came the same day as a high-profile ISIS attack further to the west. So this was on the same day. Again, we've seen a lot of these. The U.S. has really stepped up its operations against against ISIS in Syria, with these raids and occasional drone strikes. And again, we just know so little about these operations. There's not much accountability there. All right, the last article here. This is from Connor Freeman. North Korea launches ballistic missiles in response to war drills. So the U.S. and Japan and South Korea held some war games, and then obviously North Korea reacted with some more missile tests. So North Korea fired off ballistic missiles as a response to war drills carried out by the United States, Japan, and South Korea this weekend. On Monday, Japan's Coast Guard announced that North Korea launched 2 ballistic missiles. Kim Yo-jong, the sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, warned against the increased presence of U.S. strategic assets on the Korean peninsula, saying that the frequency of using the Pacific as our firing range depends upon the U.S. forces' action and character. So saying outright, we're doing this because of what the U.S. is doing by sending more bombers to the Korean peninsula, increasing war games with South Korea. They just recently announced and agreed that they're going to do much bigger war games this year. And, we expected to see a response from North Korea, so tensions are going to remain high. So, as a warning to upcoming joint U.S. South Korean military exercises, Pyongyang fired what Tokyo called an ICBM class ballistic missile off of Japan's west coast. North Korea has conducted a record number of these launches since Washington and Seoul resumed large scale war games last year. However, North Korea's firing of the ICBM on Saturday marked the first such launch since January 1st. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said the missile flew 560 miles before landing in the Sea of Japan. So again, I think we're going to see a lot more of this. As a show of force over the Sea of Japan, the U.S. flew long-range supersonic bombers and F-16s alongside Japan's F-15 fighter jets on Sunday. Separately, the U.S. held joint air exercises with South Korea that same day. And according to the South Korean military, the U.S. flew a B-1B bomber in formation with South Korean stealth fighters. So this is something, for years, the U.S. sent a B-1B bomber last year for the first time since 2017. And they didn't start doing these big war games again until 2022, and that's the same year that North Korea launched a record number of weapons tests. So it's all has a direct correlation. And as we see the U.S. and South Korea increase this stuff, we're going to see more missile tests. All right, that's it for the news. Go check out our viewpoints. We have a lot of good ones. How the World Bank and the IMF Destroyed Yemen by Josiah Thayer. One from David Stockman, Inflation Up, Balloons Down, More War. One from Aaron Mate, Unchastened by Russiagate, the NY Times doubles down on its special counsel coverage. One from Rep. Paul Gosar, who is a representative from Arizona in the House, Republican, about the Defend the Guard Act. And this is at the Libertarian Institute. It's pretty cool that he wrote this to be published there. And this is about Dan McKnight, who leads Bring Our Troops Home. This is their project, the Defend the Guard Act. And what it is, it's a state law that you get the state to pass it. And if it comes into effect, then the National Guard of that state cannot be deployed to a war unless it's like a war officially declared by Congress. So right now, I believe a lot of the U.S. troops in Syria are National Guard. I mean, they still get deployed to these wars. So I think it's an important project that they have going on there, and it's cool to see it getting support from. Again, it's a local thing, so it's at the state level, but it's good to see, a House rep supporting it. He also spoke at the rally, Dan McKnight. It was a really good speech. Then our spotlight is from Ted Snyder. He's our columnist, but I think this is Responsible Statecraft. Yes, it is. And it's titled On Ukraine, Is Biden Signaling That As Long As It Takes May Have an End Date? Again, so there's been several signs that the U.S. is starting to think, all right, maybe we have to start winding this down. But again, they want something big to happen in these next few months, and they keep increasing this aid, so a lot can happen. Things are still, things can still really escalate really far. But anyway, that's it for me for today. I hope that was right. I'm very tired from driving to and from Washington, D.C. There's a few accidents on the way home. It took me about 4 hours, which is crazy. And I had a young boy with me the whole time. But again, it was really cool to meet people and get out there, encouraging. So yeah, we'll check out. I know Ford Fisher, if you're familiar with him, he goes to all sorts of rallies and protests, and his Twitter account, he's posting videos of all the speeches so you could go check out his Twitter. He'll put a lot of that up. And again, we're going to post some stuff if you want to check out antiwar.com later on. But that's it for me for today. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.